Hey, y'all, it's Orlando. We want to let you know that the views and opinions expressed during this podcast episode are those of the co hosts and guests and not their sponsoring institutions. Now, let's start the show. Hello, Detroit and the world. Welcome to another episode of Authentically Detroit, broadcasting live from our Zoom platforms in partnership with Audio Wave Network Studios inside the Stoudemire Wellness Hub, sponsored by the Ford Foundation. And we are a content partner to bridgedetroit.com. I am Orlando Bailey.
And I'm Donna Davidson.
Thank you for listening in and supporting our efforts to build a platform of authentic voices for real people on the east side of Detroit. We want you to like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on our platforms. We drop a new episode every week, so be sure to turn on those notifications. Today, we are discussing our tendency to conflate trauma with culture, as well as the romanticism we carry as a people for experiences that are oftentimes traumatizing to us. We will be discussing the celebritization and immortalization of the quote unquote bad guys and girls that we love to love and revere. We'll also carry the tension of Detroiters wanting to feel safe and the surveillance we are all under in this city. Here to help us talk about this is PhD candidate at Union University, Yusef Bunchy Shakur, and longtime city builder and thought leader out of Philly, Michael O'Brien. Future Dr. Yusef and Michael, welcome to Authentically Detroit.
Now, I think based on Yusef's gear, his current university affiliation is clearly the University of Michigan.
Yusef, where is the Union University gear at, bro?
Still at the stuff. I'm working on that, man.
It's good to see you, man. You look so. I wish y'all could see you. He looks so distinguished. You got the salt and pepper happening.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I like the look. I love the look, man.
Thank you, man.
And Michael O'Brien, my friend out of Philly, Pennsylvania. What's up, brother? How are you?
So, man, I'm well. I'm a little tired today. It's cold. I feel like I'm in. That's how cold it is here. It feels like Detroit.
Yeah, yes. It's cold. It's cold right now in Detroit.
It's cold in the D. Donna, how's the day finding you?
It's good. It's good. It's the first day when I have not had a deadline in a whole week. I came back from vacation. I had all of these things I had to do, and so today I was kind of chill. Last night I watched the college championship football game, and I watched Georgia beat Alabama, and the score was not that much different than when Georgia beat U of M. So, if you follow football, then you probably disagree with me, but I felt vindicated by that game.
Donna, I actually think it's really, really dope that you are such a college football fan. I think that's dope. You don't see that too often.
Is she a college football fan or is she a U of M football fan?
I'm a college football fan. Let me tell you, my son ran track from the time that he was in 7 to the time he was 18. He was supposed to actually run track at U of M, but he changed his mind and decided to have fun instead. But in the process, I got to know a lot of young men who went to college playing football. And up until then, I knew nothing about football. So my sister laughs at me. She listens to Authentically Detroit, so she's going to laugh listening to this. She laughs at me because she used to make up rules for sports. And since I didn't know anything, I believed them, and she, humiliate me and laugh at me. And now I am the resident expert in our family. So it's like, what happened, Donna? But I just got to know people who played. And yes, most of them played for U of M. My kid's track coach was Stan Edwards, who used to play for U of M. His son, Braylon Edwards, was at U of M when my kids were running track for him. And, but his son, Berkeley, went to Minnesota. And then, so we followed the teams, and I got to know the young people. And so it was really getting to know young people and watching my son play a little bit of football, which he didn't like that, exposed me to the sport.
Speaking of football, and we're talking about trauma today, I went to Eastern Michigan University. You don't want to, if you don't want to follow our football team at EMU, man. Well, it's really good to see everybody. Hopefully the day is finding each of you all right. It is time for Hot Takes, where we run down some of the week's top headlines in the city of Detroit. For Hot Takes, first story up that we want to talk about: how do Detroiters really feel about bike lanes? This is by Bryce Huffman at Bridge Detroit. So, point of clarification that I saw somebody make online. It's how Detroiters feel about bike lanes and not bikes. Donna, what say you?
I mean, first of all, let's start with the price tag. $14 million spent on bike lanes since 2011. And we live in a city where there are so many urgent needs. So you have to ask yourself, how did you arrive at that? And city planners say, well, it's because so many people in Detroit don't have cars. Well, why not public transportation? I mean, we built this expensive M1 line, or I don't remember what you call it, Q line. It gets these new names, the Q line. But what people really want is bus service that works, rail service that works, anything that will help take people from A to B. Riding a bike on a day like today is a non-starter. And the bike lanes, the way they have been planned and thrown up, just make people very frustrated because they seem unsafe. Nobody is being included in the planning process. And like there's bike lanes in front of our offices on in front of the Stoudemire Wellness Hub on Connor that make no sense. I have never seen a person ride a bike through there, and I pray I don't, because it's not safe. It's also a trucking route, right? So do you want a bike lane next to a truck route? So I think that they're saying that there's an increase in bike ridership, and I ride bikes. I actually like bike riding. But I think that bike lanes are still a contentious issue, in part because of the prioritization of bikes over other types of transportation, and also the decision-making around where to put the bike lanes. And, we live in a city where we're spending maybe $4 million in a good year on home repair grants. So when you compare $4 million in home repair grants to, say, $3 or $4 million in bike lanes, it doesn't look like justice.
Yeah. It doesn't. And, one of the things that you said that sort of strikes me is the throwing up of these bike lanes without any real community education on how to use them as not only a biker, but as a driver. I can't tell you how many drivers I've seen riding down Jefferson and Connor using the bike lane as a real lane, and just how dangerous that is, especially on a street like Connor, where that street is nothing but industry, and you have Stellantis's trucks and freight trucks riding up and down Connor all day. And so that price tag of 14 million, you can't help but think of what else we could have done with that money.
Yeah. And you know what? It's kind of insulting. We have a business there. There's lots of businesses along Connor Avenue. Why don't we get a notification? We're putting a bike lane up. What do you think? Come here to a design meeting so we can talk about it. Now, Connor wasn't as ridiculous, but now they're planning a new streetscape on Connor. Still haven't asked us about it, where they're going to take it down to 2 lanes on the area going north towards the freeway. And one of those lanes is going to be a lane that is also a bus lane. So it will be down to 1 lane traffic with all of the trucks nobody talked about. Have you been on Kercheval lately?
I have.
Have you been on Kercheval, Yusuf?
Not recently.
Yusuf not from the east.
Come east. You got to come east and see what they did to Kercheval. Because I don't understand it at all.
Come to the east side, Yusuf. It's okay over here. We good. To the east side.
We're not gonna start that one.
Listen, in Hot Takes, Warren Evans penned an op-ed for Bridge Detroit. It's time to end prison gerrymandering in Michigan. One of the first times I heard the term. And his lead says this: no citizen who has ever been incarcerated would make the mistake of confusing their prison cell with their home. prison is nobody's home. So it should be obvious that incarcerated people in Michigan should be counted as residents based on where they choose to live and where they will likely return upon release, not where they are temporarily and involuntarily housed. Typically, returning citizens do not remain in the rural areas where those prisons are located after their period of incarceration is done. They return home after their release to their own communities and where they lived prior to their sentences. It is you know, I guess it's funny hearing this from a law enforcement professional, right? Like I see you get really big. But you know, Sergio Martinez Beltran, who we had on the show last week, also penned an article, you know, naming prison gerrymandering, where rural areas get to count folks who are incarcerated as their citizens to obtain political power and preference in redistricting, maps, census, all of that. And it almost always disadvantageously affects communities of color, communities where marginalized people reside, like the city of Detroit. We do know in the state of Michigan that Black folks alone make up about 13-14% of the population in the state of Michigan, but we are overrepresented. And when I say overrepresented, almost 50% of us make up the prison population in the state of Michigan. This is absurd. This is obscene, and I don't understand how this continues to be allowed without a real public debate in the marketplace of ideas on how we remedy this and how our representation has been stifled and lopsided in the state of Michigan because of this unjust practice that has been going on for years. This is particularly close to my heart because I have two brothers who are incarcerated in rural areas in Michigan, and they are Detroiters. They grew up in Detroit, they were born in Detroit, and they will return to Detroit when they come home. But we do not get to see the benefit of their citizenship in the city of Detroit because they are housed involuntarily in these rural areas. I don't understand the logic and understand how this is still a practice in 2021. What say you guys?
Well, you know, to me, it's just if prisons are the 21st century plantations, then it reminds me of the 3/5 compromise, where Black bodies were counted to build political power for plantation owners in southern states, while they didn't have the right to vote or any other rights. And so in this 21st century, you have wardens acting like overseers, you have prison labor being uncompensated, and you have people whose bodies are counted when they cannot vote. And so I think it's a racial justice issue at the core of what's still wrong in our nation. It's 13 part 2. Why are we still doing this?
Why?
I'll add real quick. It's the context of the lawmakers, the policy makers who created this type of policy to exist, which is white men and white women, but also it's tied to Donna's point where Black bodies are still looked at as a commodity. It's just a different formation of that commodity, which also continues to say that our bodies don't matter or don't value or not value. And that's why I would love to. I haven't read the article. Warren Evans to go that way and also talk about himself, the millions of dollars him and his brother made off of the phone system that they ran in Wayne County jails.
Yeah, I
wait. No, we can't move on from that. What?
When Warren Evans was what he used to be the Wayne County, when he was over the Wayne County sheriffs.
Yeah.
Him and his
brother Blair?
Yeah, him and his brother Blair, they owned the phone system for the county jails or something like that. They financially benefited from it.
I know they owned a school district for incarcerated youth in Highland Park. So, we make good money that is very problematic. The phone system is one of the most egregious abuses
and expensive. And so that's the other thing, the contractors that the Michigan Department of Corrections chooses to use that folks like me who have loved ones and friends who are incarcerated make rich, because I got to keep money on the phone. I got to use the JPay app, and I got to buy stamps, and I got to send letters. I also have to put money on commissary, and I don't know who those contractors are. Like all of those things. It is completely asinine that this is still going on. And what's even more crazy is that this is being pinned by Warren Evans. I'm like, hello.
Listen, I met Blair at the Bog Center in some progressive circle. I had no idea that he was engaged in this. I thought he was a progressive. He was going to free us, right? And so it's just interesting to me, what is our standard around how we treat each other and what we do? Because we live in a capitalist environment where everything, where it's extractive. And especially the Black and brown bodies. And so when we do it to each other, that even feels more harmful. And sometimes we actually facilitate other people doing it to us. I wonder what racism and commodification would look like if you couldn't put a Black man as emergency manager. What would we have done without the Black face there to calm us and be your frat brother, so we can't really talk about him now. So, I think that we have ways of really acting against our own people in situations like that. That is extremely disappointing to hear that.
Well, that wraps up Hot Takes. If you have pieces that you want discussed on the podcast, you can hit us up on our socials at Authentically Detroit on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. So for our featured discussion this week, we are talking to our guest about the stripes we earn being from marginalized communities with our fair share of traumatizing experiences, right? Mike, I want to start with you. And, we want to carry this conversation with a lot of nuance, and we want to, have it carefully, but we also want it to be authentic and raw to the best that we can do. But why do we wear our trauma like a badge of honor a lot of the times? What has happened in our psyche?
Well, I think there are a couple of different things combining to make this a regular, right, thing for us that we sit in. One is a lot of it has to do with power. So in general, trauma is marked by the absence of power. That's one of the main constituent parts of what makes a trauma traumatic, or what makes a trauma, right? And you know me, I'm about to give you a definition, because I don't want people listening and being like, I didn't have power to get off the highway, that's traumatic, right? Because I think that's the other thing, is language becomes so, the term is colloquial, like we use language so much as humans, because it's just a part of like daily living. But the problem is we use words in all kinds of settings where it's not necessarily the most appropriate. It takes on its own definition, and then all of a sudden, driving in traffic is traumatic, and my friend getting shot is traumatic. And those two things are not necessarily the same thing, right? Unless I'm going to see my mom in the hospital and there is an expiration date on her life, and I'm nearing that moment and I'm trying to get there, and traffic now is traumatic. I have a deadline that I have to meet, and I might lose my job if I don't get there. Now that traffic might be traumatic, but often traffic's just annoying and it's not traumatic, but we'll use that kind of language. So in clearing up the definition of trauma, I like to use two different ones that I think are pretty simple, but really powerful at the same time. The first one is from the American Psychiatric Association, and they state that trauma involves a perceived or literal threat to one's physical or emotional well-being, and it is going to elicit or bring out intense feelings of terror, helplessness, or a lack of control. And it's particularly that last part that has to do with power, right? Because anytime when you have no control and you are terrified and you can't control anything happening in the moment, particularly you can't stop the thing that is happening to you, no matter how hard you try or how much you want or will it to. That is a part of the identifiers, right, of an experience being traumatic. Again, a perceived or literal threat to your emotional or physical well-being. Keyword there being perceived or literal, right? So by default, I also can't tell you what's traumatic because I'm not inside of you. I can't perceive what you see as a threat. And again, that experience is going to bring out of you feelings of terror, helplessness, or a lack of control. Again, we're talking about power in that last part. The other definition I'll submit to you comes from a guy named Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote a fantastic book called The Body Keeps the Score. If anybody ever wants to read one book on trauma, I typically often recommend that one. And what Dr. Bessel van der Kolk says, paraphrasing, is that a traumatic experience is when whatever is happening to you overwhelms your internal and external abilities or resources to cope. So based on those two definitions, I think you can probably, and your listeners can probably hear why I'm talking about power as being part and parcel to why we can take things that make us feel utterly powerless and try to turn them into something that actually defines power for us. Because I took something back, actually. That thing that had control over me, oh no, well, we're just going to change the story around it. And actually, not only did I change the story around it, I changed it into something that no longer had control over me in a particular kind of way, even if it might have control over me to an extent, right? So poverty becomes something that we can move around through and mess with and figure out ways that we can have power while still experiencing poverty. And then certain things start to become a badge of honor because we're going to, again, circumvent the narrative and the meaning we're making out of it. And it's no longer going to rob me of control and choice. I'm going to find my center of control in this somewhere and get me some power back. And the simplest place I point that out is in school, right? You want to, if you're a teacher, you know there's one thing you can never do. You can't win in an argument with a kid. That's the wrong paradigm. It's not about winning or losing in an argument with a young person. Because if you win the argument, now you just look like a jerk in front of everybody else and to that kid. And if you lose the argument, now you've lost respect, right? So you've got to actually step out of a win-lose paradigm and be focused on building relationships, right? But there's this thing where young people, if they lack power in other places, they'll just grab it wherever they can. They don't care. So in the middle of your classroom, in the middle of your lesson, so you got to actually be thoughtful as a teacher, depending on the kind of neighborhood you're working in, where people might experience a lot of powerlessness, and you're going to have to build places for young people to have power, or they'll just grab it wherever they can. And that's just teacher management kind of 101.
Especially a narrative. Go ahead, Donna.
Where does pain, grief, and loss fit into this definition of trauma?
Yes.
Because it seems like, physical trauma is certainly, a direct assault on somebody, and it's not the psychological thing of fear. It is responding to something that is very concrete. So I'm wondering how your definitions incorporate those issues.
So I just want to make sure I got you. You said fear, grief, and loss, right?
Right. Those are like concrete happenings.
Loss causes an experience of trauma.
Pain, grief, and loss. I'm sorry. Pain.
Sorry. So pain is a cause of trauma, right? As much as it's like a byproduct to an extent, right? But pain is something that you experience because of things like loss, because of expectation management, right? Or expectations that aren't met. So pain, particularly the kind of pain that also produces grief, become, if you will, feeders of what we would call traumatic grief. It's deeper, right? It is heavy. It takes lots of time to get over, if you get over anything, right? Because grief is about the kind of losses in our lives where we cannot go back to what we had prior. And that is a very hard psychological, talk about powerlessness. Right? You lose a parent, you lose a child, you lose a loved one, a best friend. There are high schools in Philadelphia where a young person can go in at 14, and by 18, on average, they might lose 5 young people a year. You can lose up to 20 friends by the time you graduate. We don't even have a way to organize that kind of grief. It's so bad, there's research now on the grief gap.
Okay, go ahead, Donna. Wow, a grief gap.
I was going to ask this later, but I was just revisiting Dr. Joy Degree and her construct of post-traumatic slavery syndrome. Where do you stand on that?
I think she's 100% right. I think she's 250% right. Coming across a lecture of hers when I was like 23 and like screaming and jumping up and down because
Right.
for 24, because in my work at that point, I've been studying trauma for about 3 years at that point, trauma theory and resilience theory, and I kept going like, but I'm also Black. Like I got a whole history of stuff. Plus, I have to deal with the way that the world responds to my Blackness and the way that the world has conceptualized what being Black means to them, and therefore having to deal with the ways that they perceive me as a threat or as immoral or as whatever they've organized around this identity. And it just didn't there didn't seem to be a lot of space for those kind of conversations. And so when I ran into her work, I was excited and astounded. And she says something fascinating that I love because it's also partly how I got into the study of trauma. She mentioned that she went down this pathway because she was trying to understand violence amongst Black people. To understand, like, what is that? Why is that happening? Because we weren't always this violent, if you will. And I put that all in air quotes because, I mean, arguably the question is, how violent are we really? Or is it just the structure by which we organize these data points that determine us to be violent by the ways that people, again, are qualifying what's violence? If you ask me, right?
How we frame that narrative. That's right.
Violence is always interesting to me. When we call Black people violent, this nation was birthed in violence. Yes. We spend more of our budget on police forces in cities and military at the national level than we do on anything else. And that is violence, okay? The creation and just ownership of an atomic bomb is violence in the extreme. How dare we call Black people violent when we have been violated? Right. And it just seems to me that you take the violated and call us violent, and people just pass it on like it's okay. Like violence, like we were segregated. Everything about our existence in America has been violence. Poverty is violence. Segregation is violence. Incarceration is violence. We live in a world where we live in a country that worships guns. The Second Amendment is the most valued amendment, and yet we are violent as a people, and we buy into that. You know what I mean? I think it's so crazy that we have internalized those labels. But I want to bring Yusef into this conversation because Yusef, you said something really profound. And when I listen to Dr. George,
always saying something profound.
He does. You got to listen to him though, because he just drops some knowledge in the middle of something. It's like, but I want to. But no, okay. So one of the profound things that Yusef said recently is talking about culture, right? And so you listen to what Dr. Degree says. Now, it's brilliant. I listen to it every year just so I can stay on track, right? She keeps me focused. But when she talks about how we function as a people as post-traumatic slavery disorder, right? We call that culture. Or I think that's what Yusef was getting at. Can you talk more about what you meant by that, Yusef?
Yusef, you're muted. You're muted if you're talking. Sorry about that.
Thank you. The new world we live in, right? To put things in context. So as I'm going through my PhD program, and there's a tons of reading in any program, but particularly at this level, as Mike just referenced, right? There's theories. There's a lot of different theories. I didn't know there was a trauma theory. There was a resilient theory, along with there's queer theory, there's critical race theory. It's critical theory, but there's no theory related to Black people. I repeat, there's no theory related to Black people. So again, when you look most theories are born out of certain studies or certain struggles. So even like feminist theory and feminists was born out of the feminist struggle. Same thing with queer theory. So you have Black studies, but we didn't produce a Black social theory. And so my point is, and that is the inability to synthesize our experience, what we've been through, to help us to rationalize it, to rationalize our trauma associated with our pain that's tied to our oppression. We continue to be bathed in it, and within it, the Black social theory, it should help us define finally what is our culture? What is the culture? So like, I mean, it's 4 of us on right here right now. We all consider ourselves Black, but if we would all probably give a different definition around Black.
Let's try it.
Because of our different lived experience, because of things that we've read. So we have to come up with a concrete definition to Black. And Black doesn't necessarily represent the culture. Black is the aesthetics, the things that we've developed out of our struggle. You know, Black was born out of the resistance to the inferiority that was imposed upon us. Because remember, you know, we had been given every other name but our right name in this country. Black was the only name that we had, you know, really gave to ourselves, which became a political identity as a framework. But over the years, because it has not been synthesized, it has lost its meaning. You know, we're now, you know, we associate our pain with our trauma, with our oppression. I mean, look, you know, I'm pretty sure we listen to hip hop, right?
Yeah.
I challenge hip hop. I don't think it's a culture; it's a subculture, right? I mean, because of, I mean, it has the elements of it, but in reality, there's the high level of hip hop. It celebrates the oppression, the internalized oppression that goes on within our community, and because it's a form of capitalize, we can capitalize off of it. We can, you know, it's easy to be able to put us out there because at the end of the day, Black folks trying to hustle. We try to pay the bills. And so what's the easier way to pay the bills than to make fun of yourself? And when you have not healed or confronted that. So to be able to identify and understand culture, we have to understand by creating a theory. And the theory is about, it comes out of our experience, the experience of Black people in America to define us, to create the standard and the criteria. And also this is what, you know, Bobby E. Wright, who called for a Black social theory that helps us define who Black people is in the 21st century.
Can we talk a little bit about root causes? Because I also hear us talking about, you know, being traumatized. And one of the things that I want to name is that there are still so many of us who are in active trauma, right? Can we talk about root causes of Black marginalization in America and the many ways that trauma is processed by us and how we show up because of it, be it productive or non-productive ways on the pavements of our neighborhoods?
I think like what just happened recently with Antonio Brown, right? And where he walks off the field, he takes off his shirt, and the immediate response, everybody says Antonio Brown needs help. I'm not here to argue or dispute that, but the level of anti-Blackness that exists in the world, that is part of the root causes. And many of us don't even realize that we're looking at Antonio Brown as we look at each and every one of ourselves through a lens of anti-Blackness. The fact that not giving, you know, Orlando, Mike, or Donna the chance, you know, same thing in where, you know, the whole buy Black is part of it is we don't trust Black business. We don't trust Black people. But why is that? Because we've been taught to hate ourselves. We've been taught not to value each other because I mean, they're just like today, you know, Harbaugh, you know, the coach of U of M. You know, everybody's talking about whether he's going to take a job in the NFL, and the way they framed it says he wanted to wait till Black Monday. He wanted to wait till Black Monday, and Black Monday meaning the coaches who get fired yesterday. And so my point is, in this country, everything that's evil and bad is associated with what? Black. And that is part of that internalization that we go through. And at the end, then it alludes to what Mike was talking about earlier too, is a power dynamic. And when we think about Black, we don't think about power with Black. We think about powerless. And so we want to be associated with power. So that's another form, a connection to that root cause of not being valued, being oppressed, and it's all tied into what many are identifying now as anti-Blackness.
Mike, I want to bring you in on this conversation. You were making a point a little bit earlier around this narrative of violence and us being violent and how we show up toward each other. Want to ask you number one, to expound on that a little bit more, linking it to some of the root causes that all of us experience at one point or another in our lives.
Yeah, I might ask you for a clarifying question on root causes when I get to that part, but my friends laugh at me because I think it's the best creative branding job of the 21st century, and that is the branding of Black people as inherently violent. I mean, it's like a cosmic joke to Donna's point earlier. Like, I don't even need to say much else because she nailed it, right? I mean, it is fascinating to be descended from people who are stolen from their land for their human capital, but denied their humanity, put to work in a ultra violent system that said things, and this is referencing the work of Dr. Joy DeGruy, right? Like that women couldn't even be sexually assaulted because by law, they were given over to lasciviousness. They were promiscuous by nature. So the idea of raping a Black woman just wasn't even possible, right? I mean, this is the country, and that's in the 1800s. That's not even like 16, 19 and going that far back, right? I mean, this is the country that we live in. And these are the narratives and myths that are still shaping the way that modern medicine considers our Black bodies in space and place. And it's something that people are confronting. I'll give them that credit, but we're not going to act like this violence hasn't existed across multiple sectors, across multiple centuries, and was not challenged. It was not challenged. So much so that when I went to see the work of Brian Stevenson and his team down in Alabama, and literally got sick halfway through the museum because of these photos of 9,000 white people gathering to hang and burn Black bodies in the early 1900s. Another scene of like 6,000 white people excited to burn and hang Black bodies and cut babies out of women's stomach. And again, bro, this isn't 1820. There are clear pictures. This is 1930.
People living today. Right. We're celebrating that. And my favorite one in Dr. Degree, remember the one where she shows the little girl who's watching the charred body of a lynch, and she's sitting there looking at him like this. And she said, if you did that to a puppy, that child would be traumatized. But that child is looking there at that, and that is the impact of the behavior of her parents and that culture on that child, that it is not just Black people who walked away. And it kind of reminds me of Aimé Césaire in the discourse on colonialism, where he talks about the fact that when you dehumanize people, the beast, you become a beast, okay? You cannot retain your humanity by dehumanizing others. You become the beast. So we live in this nation where the beast is acting like the victim, and trying to hide their hands, because we are talking about it, but we're trying to outlaw it in every state and every school district, and accusing people of critical race theory for even bringing up race, because that's the other thing that's happened, is this gaslighting behavior of saying, we're going to pretend like racism doesn't exist. I can't even tell you're Black. I don't see race. I don't care about green people, Black people, red people, orange people. I don't see race. And it's a denial of culpability, really, right?
100%. And I think the other thing that you just, took the words right out of my mouth around dehumanization. We actually have to name it and center it in the work and in the conversation, because Black people have been taught to dehumanize ourselves. We've been taught to, but without using that term, though, right? It accompanies or is alongside the journey of white supremacy. White supremacy became this term that we could not use anymore. But the activity never went away.
Yeah.
That's like calling a dog a cat. Like, you can switch labels, but treat that dog that is really a cat like a dog, and you will wear literally on your body the pain of trying to socialize that cat as the dog that you're calling it. Literally what we've been doing it, right? Try to wash a cat. That,
I've got 2 cats and I'm trying to imagine them as dogs.
like it just wouldn't work. But that literally is the absurdity of this country over the last 100+ years. I tell you, there's a book I read that blew my mind. 2 books that I read that blew my mind, but this one really just made me go, "Oh my God!" Came out in 2017, 2018. It's called Hitler's American Model.
Yeah.
It was the
Yeah.
title that grabbed me. I said, "Ooh,
Yeah.
ooh, this
Yeah,
is."
Isabel Wilkerson talks about it in Cass.
Yes, yes, she does. I read that book, Orlando, and was like, "What in the good hell? How? But this is it's a choice to craft a narrative that says those Germans, the Nazis, the epitome of scum. America stepped in and saved the world. And then when you read this book, you go, oh, wow. Not only were we the inspiration behind Nazi race law, American race law was the inspiration behind Nazi race law. The part that blew my mind was there are moments when they were gathered and said, you know what? That's a little too mean. We're not going to do that. Can you believe that? Nazi Germany said we were too mean.
I mean, it is the writing down of a thing, the thought and putting it to paper, creating this narrative that can precipitate hundreds and hundreds of years of oppression, of murder, of mass genocide. Yusef, I want to bring you in on this conversation around of narrative power. Is something that I'm passionate about, and you constantly leverage your platform to, number one, introduce us to new terms and new ways of thinking, distancing ourselves from what we have been taught and internalized for decades and decades. You're muted. We should tell the future Dr. Yusef to just stay off of mute. Yeah.
I think it's important though that we have to realize that we have to unlearn what we know to learn what we don't know. We have to unlearn what we know to learn what we don't know. And part of that is unlearning what they told us about ourselves, to be able to see our authentic selves, not only as an individual, but as collective and community. So to this point around narrative, if I ask anybody around, we did a poll about Malcolm X. Was he violent or non-violent? Most people are going to say Malcolm X was violent. But there's when Malcolm X becomes Malcolm X, there's nothing that shows that he was ever violent, he's ever shot anybody, he ever smacked anybody. But because what they've told us about Malcolm, that he same thing like the Black Panther Party. Like we think the way they told us about the Black Panther, we think they was worse than the KKK, right? But that's the dynamics of white supremacy, white oppression. In terms, it's sophisticated too. And in terms of the reality, like they view us as a threat. So how do you neutralize that threat? By creating this false image, this false dichotomy of them in terms of like we're violent. And so this is also was part of the police, why they kill us. Because again, Orlando, you reaching for your pick. Oh, I thought the pick was a gun. But it's the perception, it's the threat that it ignites in them that I fear for my life. And I'm pretty sure we would go back and we listen to some of those interviews. Most of them say something along those lines, because it's even though we're in the modern times, they still look at us as savages. Yeah. Because that was the justification for our oppression, right? And then the way we function, I told you that that's what they are, in terms of the ghetto, and then our own people, those who are so influent, who are moving away, they help maintain that narrative too. Like, okay,
through respectability politics. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So it's important that we have to reshape and challenge those things. And to be able to do that, again, I repeat again, we have to unlearn what we know to learn what we don't know.
But I think what's even more threatening to white supremacy than a Black person behaving in a threatening manner is a Black person defying their stereotypes. I remember when I was in undergrad And this white classmate of mine came to me, and I had this Black professor as an African-American history class. And a white girl came to me and she says, "You try to be so smart." She tries to be so smart. And she was going off on them, I've always been opinionated. And so he looked at her, he said, "Well, how do you try to be smart? Either you are or you aren't." She got so mad at me. She was ready to fight me because she couldn't feel superior to me. And it was important to her identity to feel superior. You saw that really operationalized under the Obama administration. Whenever you think about Obama, the Obamas, Barack and Michelle, they represented an existential threat, them and all of the people around them, to this notion of white supremacy, this notion of them being able to do things that Black people could not: speak a certain way, dress a certain way, behave a certain way. Here you had this president who emulated all of what they said they believed in. And it just seems to me as though we have to acknowledge the fact that respectability is no cure. In the 1960s, Black men were being killed in business suits and, overcoats and nice hats. I mean, it was, women were being killed, had dogs sicked on them and nice dresses and heels and pearls on their necks. So when we buy into that, not only is it wrong to dehumanize one group, but it's not even a solution. I think our solutions have to be other than trying to accommodate the white gaze in any way, because the white gaze is always going to want to see us a certain way, punish us for being a certain way, and then punish us for being the other way because we're not white.
And the white gaze barely even likes other white people. Like, I think
Right.
it's like whiteness as a construct has evolved over time. They, reluctantly let in other people that they did not consider white because they needed a power block, right? So there is this thing where historically and in a contemporary sense, you see it. They are willing, white people are willing, white people of a certain amount of power are willing to put other white people on the chopping block to maintain that power. And that's just the thing that I got it when I saw the way they treated their own children who were getting shot up. And I was like, oh
yeah. You ain't taking my gun. We don't care.
I was like, wow, yeah.
But we're not violent.
Can we, speaking of white gaze, I want to bring this level of nuance into the conversation. I want to talk about the enticement of commodification of some of the traumatic experiences that Black folks have had to endure and continue to endure. And when I say commodification, Yusef, future Dr. Yusef, I'm talking about hip hop. I'm talking about shows like BMF and Power and Snowfall. I'm talking about our love and affinity for the gangster, for the murderer. I'm talking about American Gangster, Frank Lucas. I'm talking about all these figures that we have celebritized as a culture, not only for us to see it play out in a dramatized version, not only for us, but the white gaze is also watching that and affirming what they've been taught for so long. Can we dig into this a little bit, and can we break that down?
I think that's an important conversation. So like Max Julian who just passed, right? The Mac. And he's forever will be crystallized in our mind for that role. We don't remember him for nothing else. But there was a movie he played in before that movie. It was called Uptight. As you Google it, it's on YouTube. And Uptight, actually the scene in the Mac when him and old boy they arguing, and he like, we can get in some pimp shit or we can get in some gangster shit. They're both in this movie called Uptight. And in this movie that Ruby Dee wrote and produced, they was Black revolutionaries. They was Black nationalists. They was fighting for Black freedom. And a year later, they're pimps, they're Macs. And the transition helped change the dichotomy in our community, because remember, prior to the movies such as The Mac and Superfly, which became leading characters in our community, which ultimately, to what you're asking, it killed a Huey P. Newton. It killed a Malcolm X. It killed Angela Davis, a Donna Shakur, that the folks in our, the Black is Beautiful struggle and emergence coming into that, in the troubling 70s with Heron, which get into Frank Lucas, and et cetera. Like these become the writing off of these movies becomes the characters that we're now fed, and then coming into the 80s, Young Boy, Detroit in particular, Young Boys Incorporated. The East Side, what's the East? Not the Chamber Boys, but the Best Friends, right? They're folks that we're upholding, and then bringing it back. Like when the movie Black Panther came out, everybody loved Killmonger. Everybody, he was a revolutionary, Yusef. Hold up, don't come for Killmonger. Man, Killmonger was everything we just talked about. He was full of drama. He's full of anger. However, he reminded us of our fathers. He reminded us of our brothers. That aspiration, that hope that we want to see. With T'Challa, we like, fuck T'Challa. He too nice. But that goes back to the previous conversation, the internalized hate, the anti-Blackness, but also the exploitation. There's no accountability to 50 Cent to our community. They're feeding us these, and also, like Big Meech. And I tell young people, for Big Meech to reach a success, how many Black families he had to destroy? And I'm not talking about Big Meech per se, but in that system to reach his highest height, he had to sell tons of crack cocaine. But he had to be willing to kill to do that. And who was he killing? Us. And we don't examine that because, man, that's how it always gonna be. And we accept that.
But I'm doing working on this understanding of Detroit, right? And we talk about all kinds of things about Detroit. We talk about redlining, we talk about this, we talk about that. We don't talk about Big Meech. We don't talk about the Chambers brothers. And we don't have any accountability for how our own people Snowfall. Wasn't the guy in Snowfall, what's his name? Rick Ross. Rick Ross was the agent of the Ronald Reagan war on Contra, bringing drugs from South America here and creating these cocaine houses. Now I have to date myself. When I think of Max Julien, I'm older than you all, so I think of his coats that were really popular in the 1980s, right, with drug dealers. But I don't think of Goldie. That came before me or whatever. But I think of his coats. We have this whole fashion culture that's designed around that. So much of who we are is designed around is hyper materialism, and you have to kill people to get it. You have to be a drug dealer to get it, and your average corner boy is not making the kind of money to buy these things. So we're celebrating the kingpins. Mike, I want to bring you in on this.
Yeah, I agree, but I also just, and this could sound like I'm taking up for folks, but I think the key part to me and what you just said, Donna, is all of that, the Reagan and the Iran-Contra affair, and Black people don't have enough power in this country to have a drug monopoly. We don't. The same way we don't have enough power in this country to start an independent national school system that can rival the public school system, right? And so there is this space here where the reality of Black, if you will, degradation is still found in the hands of white folks. And that's uncomfortable for them. It's uncomfortable for the people who believe like, oh, well, Black spending power will solve it. The math, that's not true. The math's not there for that, right? But that's another narrative that's like pushed and people keep pushing. And so I think that
but we're not talking about blame, right? What we're talking about is the capacity. Listen, if we wait for white people to want to stop exploiting and dehumanizing and using us and commodifying us so that we can be healthy, then we will probably be waiting forever. What can we decide as a people we're going to change, understanding these forces, understanding what they want from us? They didn't want us to read, but we read. They didn't want us to have businesses, but we have them. So I think that there have been times where we've pushed back against the expectations and the conditions that were set before us. And I'm wondering if we are powerless as a people to create something different than what has been given to us.
So it's a yes and, right? Because as much as we started business, they bombed the shit out of those businesses, right? When I think about the amount of terror, again, visited upon groups of people.
Yep.
Over,
How do we protect it from right terrorism?
like when I think about the generation before me who watched King, X, Huey Newton, watched all these assassinations and then just like didn't do anything, I'm like, that's trauma. I get it. You watched everybody get killed for just being like, black people and humans deserve to be free and fed. And the response from white people was a systematic takedown that didn't even need to be private. It was the FBI, it was local law enforcement working with them. Presidents were cool with it, like people were cool with it. So I do think that's why I'm saying I don't think it's about blame, but when the moment we start talking about commodification and we're naming people, it's like, yeah, but they're not in a vacuum by default. Like the systems-based analysis of that thing means that when we talk about Rick Ross, it does include all that other stuff. So for me, it's shifting the frame, right? It's about, I don't get too lost in that because I think I'll give you a really seemingly asinine metaphor. When my goal is to connect with the young people whose life's trajectory put their body in the way of a bullet and their pants might be sagging no matter how tight they are, I know a number of people who are going to start that conversation with, young man, pull up your pants. That's the 17th conversation I plan on having with that young person. Because my job is to build relationship. You know what I mean? And I think that to me is a part of this space that, like, I agree with the commodification piece, but the other part that I hear from young people is like, yo, but that some of that is my lived experience. That is my life. And I do want to feel validated in my experience.
And I'm not at all suggesting that we attack each other. I'm not suggesting that we put people down, walk in and do the respectability game, right? I am suggesting that we bring each other forward to a system of higher values. And that's something I think Yusef is working to do in his community. So now we're able to talk about this community house that you've opened up, Yusef, where you're looking at introducing different ways of being inside the community without attacking people, but showing people we don't have to be this way. Is that a good way of introducing your work?
Yeah, it is, but also part of that work is the analysis. The analysis is our neighborhoods, particularly Black neighborhoods, went from being a neighborhood to being a hood, and it's part of that demodification that laid the groundwork for what we see in the movie about Big Meech, BMF and the Power and so many others that we continue to glorify, right? And it's until we address the nigger gene. I'm gonna repeat, it's until we address the nigger gene in us. Like Puffy get on TV and say, I'm from Brooklyn, baby. I'm from the hood. When the last time you been in the hood, Puffy? Right. When the last time, and it's not an attack on him, but it's again, the hood became a code word for being Black, but also it morphed into being a code word for a certain area, right? So for me, going back to my area, my community, as a former gang member, former gangster, folks who may want to call me an OG, whatever terms they want to acknowledge, but my term that matters to me is being a man. It's being an honorable person in my community. Like the realest shit my oldest son just told me recently, and me and him go through struggles all the time. He was like, Dad, when you came home, I was looking for a dope dealer dad. I repeat, he said, I was looking for a dope dealer dad. I was in prison for his first 9 years. So the impact of the hood helped raise him and help create certain images in his mind that was conflicting. But now he and his little homeboys, they have a different option. I remember like when they come in the community house, they're like, damn, man, I didn't think this would happen, right? But now we give them the option, kind of, what Mike's saying, we have to find a different route, but we also have to create the accountability, because what we're not talking about too is capitalism. Like we're capitalizing off our pain. We're capitalizing off our misery, right? And I mean, I'm not mad at the early 50s. When Dr. Dre and Eminem came up on him and said, man, we'll give you $1 million. What young brother and what young sister wouldn't take $1 million for a rap record, right? But at this stage, 50, you're no longer in South Jamaica, Queens. So that's where part of the accountability has to come in, but also part of the accountability is the changing of the mind. If we don't change the mind, it's easy to put those type of images, but also we have to think back. Again, all of us, we still live in the hood or the neighborhood, right? And so, and these images that we continue to promote through this was what continue to causing the trauma, the internal trauma, the pain on the blocks where our families live at. So that's why we have to be able to transform that through such as the Mama Core Community House.
We also
right. Can we just give Yusef, I want to make sure we give Yusef a chance because he's been an unofficial co-host and we've never really talked to him about this community house that he just completed. Can you share that work?
Sure. I mean, some folks know that we had the Urban Network bookstore that we ran for like 5 or 6 years, and we was forced to close that. And what we basically did was take that idea and took it to Finally Flat that we worked on 7.5 years. Got a lot of community donations. Also, we was able to get some funds from the Ford Foundation to finish the renovation. And so the first floor is a cafe. You know, there's TVs in the house where you can do host podcasts, host different things. Then there's a classroom upstairs. So again, having like a rec center, but it's a house, a place of refuge, a place of a sanctuary that we're trying to navigate through COVID to be able to launch these programs, particularly for people directly in community and throughout the city of Detroit, and give them an alternative to how to not only to survive, but to live in our community by respecting and loving each other and building up the hope.
Wow, that's wonderful. So Orlando, we're going to want to guest host a podcast from the community house. Is that okay with you?
I cannot wait. I cannot wait to do this.
And then, and before we continue this conversation, because I want to make sure we get this, I always feel bad about not highlighting this. How do people support your work?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, they can go to yusefshakur.org and make a donation there. Folks can reach out. I mean, the support looks differently. Like we have another community house that we're about to finish doing some renovations on, and we're going to name that one after Ron Scott. It'll be the Ron Scott Community House.
Okay. All right. So you heard it here, listeners, and hopefully Orlando and I are going to get there. But I'm sorry, Mike, I did cut you off. I know you had something profound to say because you said so many profound things. I want to make sure you get a chance to get that out.
Too kind. That was important because we do need those things literally in the hood. You got to see it. You got to be able to touch it. It's a spot where people can dream differently, right? You are like, what I love about that example of an investment in the neighborhood is that, like you said, his kids and his kids' friends came in and are like, I didn't even know this could be here. And all of a sudden are excited about it, though it's not the thing that if you had asked them, what do you want in your neighborhood? They'd be like, I want a community house with a cafe, right? Like that. What they want at the same time. That's the hard part about all this work. But what I was going to say with and this goes back to that analysis piece. The commodification, we ain't do that. I'm just going to keep it. I'm just going to name it. I'm not even going to try to sound deep. We have participated in it, but we didn't do that because we don't own the media distribution for that.
Can we undo it? Can we start undoing it?
I think what we can do, given the way the 21st century does work and the way that the internet has really grown in the last 20 years. I'm 36, right? 20 years ago, if you had told me at 16, when I'm still on, AOL, like 4.0, 5.0, whatever. You know, right? Like I would have never guessed it would be this point. Like I would have never guessed in my 20s I'd have a computer in my pocket through my phone. Like that's crazy. Like I used to sit on the subway in my 20s typing papers on my phone. Like you could have never told me that would only be like 7 years from me being in high school barely. The fact that we're at this point does mean that there is more power in our hands to do something different. I think we're just at that point of like the imaginative capacity and the mechanics to imagine in particular kinds of ways are a little stunted. So going back to the things like Yusef is talking about, we need that. We need more spaces like a place I just worked, the Village of Arts and Humanities, where we're teaching young people about media and media making and narratives and putting that into their own hands and paying them to do it and getting them fellowships in design and blah, 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 so that they're able to do that. But it is going to be I think it is going to be a bit of a steep hill, but I think the flip side is we've all got to get comfortable doing exactly what we're doing right now, but in even more public space, and being like, yo, some of these narratives and tropes are just kind of old. It's one thing to make a show, for example, some interviews with a bunch of social workers and therapists who were in their late 20s when the crack era was starting up, and they didn't even know what the hell they were looking at. They were just getting these crazy stories of like and going to these places because it was like, yo, a mom threw her baby against the wall and her husband took the pipes out and they sold it, and nobody, they were like, what the hell? No, you can't, that's not real. And then they show up and be like, oh. But it was clear that mom was not in her right mind at all. And they didn't know what it was, right? And so there are all these stories that we've got to start collecting to better understand how this happened, why it happened, who was in power when it happened, who knew, like, because I do think there is a point of responsibility here in terms of policy and understanding what's going on, so that when we start talking about accountability and reparations and justice, we're not just talking about reparations because my ancestors grew rice and grew tobacco.
That's right. That's right.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
exactly. I need reparations. What happened yesterday?
Exactly.
That's what I said. Active trauma. I want to bring this in. And of course we don't have enough time for this discussion, but I want to highlight it, and that is the tension we carry, especially in the city of Detroit. You know, in 2020 we saw a massive campaign around defunding the police, and Detroiters just weren't having that. Right. We live in Detroit. We live on the east side. We live on the west side. There was, a lot of pushback against what the assumption of what that meant. Right. Because a lot of folks didn't even know what defund the police meant. But people want to feel safe in our city. But the way police goes about policing us is diametrically opposed to our thrival and our lives, literally. How do we talk about that in a city like Detroit, Yusef? How do we talk about that in a city like Philly, Mike?
I think again it goes back to the narrative, like who created the narrative and all the dynamic that's in it that we pass on for generation to generation, and also reshaping what safety looks like. So like in a lot of our conversation spaces, people talk about peace, but until we're able to define and actually see what that looks like, it's illusion to people in the neighborhood. So like the grandmothers on the block, I'm not mad at them saying they want to call the police, right? We need to engage them and show them not that what the ideal is wrong, but we have to go address JoJo. We have to do that. Right, not in a confrontational way, but if it's necessary, there's folks that need to go in the back room. What he didn't do, yeah. But until we able to do that in a way, it's going to people going to, because they've been taught to believe in the system more than to believe in us, and until we can replace that, and where folks can depend on us, where we're going to show up, they're always going to go back to their default. Their default is to believe in the police. Their default is to believe in Mike Duggan. Even though in private conversations, we hear it all. I know he's full of shit, but he gonna give me what I want. And we have to. That's part of the struggle that we have to be able to minimize to maximize what we want to do. And I just end on this, like, through our annual backpack event, we've been able to reduce some levels of violence at times, or even like when me knowing certain individuals, they come to me like, dude, owe me such and such. I'm willing to go in and address that situation and put myself in the middle of it. And not everybody can do that, but we have to build those type of individuals up. So creating a broader spectrum of how we go do that, but also the work that you're doing, we have to amplify that in terms of narrative. Like they killing us on this narrative game.
I'm all about it. I'm all about it. I just talked to Donna's Columbia class a couple of weeks ago about it. Mike.
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that. I think it's very unfortunate that defund the police became the main narrative. That spoke to me But you didn't. I'm not the one that needed to be convinced. You get what I'm saying? And like, I think that's the problem with narrative strategy is that people don't think about the audience, right? You have to. It's sales. What's in it for me is the other person on the side, or on the other side of this like equation, if you will, who has to receive said narrative. And I don't think that rang true for people when they were crafting this. I think they crafted it for their constituents to get them riled up. And I could be wrong, right? But because this is all conjecture, this is outside looking in, because I wasn't a part of crafting the narrative. But again, fundamentally, I do believe in the concept, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that I did spend some time working alongside and even within law enforcement, public health though on my end. Like I was specifically working with the U.S. Attorney's Office of Eastern Pennsylvania as a contractor, because becoming an employee there takes forever, and they got a grant. Because make a long story short, they got a grant where they were like, we got to make you a consultant and it'll get you started right away. But I spent 3 years working on the issue of youth homicide and adult homicide and youth and adult recidivism in North Philadelphia, but through a public health approach that was all about centering trauma theory as the core basis of what was driving the issue. So for me, it wasn't about synchronized law enforcement, yada, yada, yada. Like there were things I don't know if I can say this. There are things I would observe that I just wouldn't talk about, right? Because it was not about criminalizing people. It was about understanding that the root problem, like we're looking at the branches, but the root problem is decades, arguably centuries deep, right? And there are so many players that are involved in strengthening that root over that time period that don't live in the neighborhood. Point blank. And so how do you make sense of that? And how do you organize for that? Well, these were new corners on the puzzle that law enforcement had never tried. And one of the things that I realized in the past, and we were making an attempt, and one of the things I learned from that process, bro, is that law enforcement top to bottom, and this does not just mean police. That's the other thing that I think we got to get in this.
We're talking about attorneys. We're talking about military. We're talking
it is a huge apparatus, and they all work together. And that system at large is not built to hold the care and well-being of black and brown people. Point blank. It's barely built to hold that for white people. It's definitely not built to hold that for black and brown people, definitely not black people at that. So the expectation management that we have around police keeping black people safe has a lot more to do with something called the availability heuristic. And Yusef already spoke to this clearly, but I want to name it for people because I think sometimes we can name a thing if it's a little bit easier to work with and go, and you can point at it and structure it and challenge it and all kinds of stuff and reimagine on top of it, right? So the availability heuristic, simple idea. You cannot imagine with something that you've never had a touch point with. Like creativity doesn't come from the absence of stuff. If you go to school for art, like I went to school for music, improv class was not get in a room and make up your own notes. It's literally go learn these solos, go play these things on the piano and memorize it, build yourself a vocabulary, and then we're going to get into making new things, right? And so what you have built as the foundations to make a thing with, right? So reading works the same way. We don't read by just making up our own languages and sounds and alphanumeric symbols. You learn letters, you learn numbers, you then learn how to put them together to form words, those then form sentences, and then you can get later into crafting your own sentences and words and papers and blah, blah, blah. Well, it works like that for ideas in general. Right? It works like that for seeing yourself in a career. This is why people have to see people who look like them in certain careers and jobs or whatever. It literally opens up a part of the imaginative mechanisms of the brain and the body to begin to visualize and see yourself there. The only way we know safety is through policing. That's the way it's been taught to us. So, and that's the way we've mostly inherited it, and that's the way we organize around it. So when you go to a group of people like, what do you want to see besides police to keep you safe, and you're worried about gun violence, of course everybody's going to go, the police.
But not when a white shooter happens, right? So when Ethan Crumbley went to Oxford High School and shot his classmates, I think killed 4 or something like that, he'd taken bullets to school. He took a bird's head to school in a jar. He was Googling guns. He was depicting it. and he gets sent to the counselor's office, and his parents now on trial after purchasing him a gun, because guns, but they purchased him a gun and they didn't lock it up safely or whatever. And what I hear most people say is, well, they should have had a mental health intervention. I don't hear anybody saying they should have had a police intervention. At most, they're saying they should have called protective services. Now, if Ethan Crumbley was Jamar Crumbley, he would have been subject to some police action. And so this idea that white males who kill, or white people who kill, are killed because they have mental health disorders, and Black people who kill because they're disobedient or bad or something is wrong with their character, produces a different response. One group gets mental health care, the other group gets police. Until we can begin to reframe our thinking and understand that post-traumatic stress, post-traumatic slavery syndrome, that kids who have been in foster care, kids who have been homeless, kids who have parents who are incarcerated, kids who have watched people killed, kids who have been hungry, and in all of these cumulatively traumatic situations, may have some things that are just as damaging as Ethan Crumbley's mother having an affair and not spending any time with him. Then we're going to continue doing the same thing, because you could take a Black kid who had so much more trauma than Ethan Crumbley, and you know what the society will say? Well, stop making excuses. No excuses. But with Ethan Crumbley, even though he killed so many people, they're still making excuses for him. They're still saying his parents failed him. I feel as though we are failing our young people. I love the fact that you were engaged in a mental health and trauma response effort in Philadelphia.
North Philly, yeah.
North Philly. I love the fact that you were doing that there. And I'm wondering, what is the possibility of piloting something like that here, as opposed to continuing to treat this? Because you're right, but see, policing happens after the fact. What if we provided mental health interventions before they were killing people, before they were committing crimes, when we saw that these young people needed some way to process all of the trauma they were experiencing in their lives?
So this is a good point that you bring up with defunding the police. And this is something I try to get a lot of folks to understand. It's like, why is it defund the police? Because yeah, it's after the fact, but there's also this thing where the police are interwoven throughout it happening before you get to that big moment that then has somebody incarcerated. So with things around addiction, police get called, police are the first DHS call. That is typically who, because they don't know who to call. They're like, oh, I can't call DHS. I don't know. 911, right? Mom hasn't been home for 3 days. I don't know what's going on. The kids are by themselves, or yada, yada, whatever that is. Is it criminal in air quotes? I guess. But really what we have going on is a breakdown that's really based on poverty and some mental health troubles that has made an unsafe situation. But is it something that should require the police? Actually, no. There are plenty of other trained professionals who could be brought in to handle that thing, but it by default falls to the police. Now, what was interesting about that work that I was doing is part of my work was doing police-based research. So I would talk to a number of police officers. Many of them didn't want to talk on the record, which was unfortunate, because we only ended up with like maybe 12 on the record conversations that we could use for the research. But I had a number of conversations with people off the record. Now, what I can guarantee you, there are two core things that struck me as like, well, there are a number of core things that struck me, but for this part, there are two that struck me as well. They are grossly aware of how underprepared and undertrained they are for all kinds of things, and they really don't even want to do it. They're like, I don't want to handle addiction. That's not my goal. I heard a story about someone being called out to the same parent-child interaction 3 or 4 different times, and mom wasn't even hurting the kid, but the kid was taking care of mom, and the neighbors kept calling. And the cop and the kid would beg them, please don't take me from my mom, please don't. And they're like, How many calls like that are happening, right? Or there's a domestic violence situation where they're really both hitting up on each other. And let me be clear, I am not saying in any way that women deserve to get hit. What I am saying is that there are cases where the people are legitimately fist fighting each other regularly, and the cops have shown up a bunch, and both of them are like, I don't want to press charges because he got on my nerves and I punch him in his face anytime he talked to me. Who's supposed to help with that? That's not really a police call. You need mental health support and services for that. You need something else to support you in that. If and harshly and the whole nine, yes, the police should show up. But
We
when
need
they're
to figure out how to stop getting Black women killed. I'm sorry, brother. I'm sorry.
that
I can't because there's never been a situation. I'm a survivor of domestic violence. The first thing my ex said is she hit me first. First thing he said, I have broken jaw, can't open my mouth. He said she hit me first. That is so typical. So I think that we do need, in some instances, to make sure that women are protected. I get what you're saying about fighting, but you never know. You know what I'm saying?
I want to be very, hold on. I just want to be very clear here, right? Because what I am not talking about is true domestic violence where a woman is being beat and battered, etc. What I am talking about are legitimate, like, physical fights. And this, I'm giving you stories I heard from police officers. I want to be very clear, very, very clear, where they're showing up and literally both people have fought and are saying things like, no, I don't want to press charges. They've been here 4 and 5 times. At that point, if someone doesn't want to do that and the police can't do a certain thing, because remember, this isn't about, I'm not talking about right or wrong, and I'm not talking about not protecting women. We're talking about defunding the police.
I hear. I'm just saying if we could just leave that to domestic violence professionals, because I understand what police say. And I'm going to say this. I was almost arrested that day because my ex was a firefighter. He knew all the police officers. He told me, if you ever called the police on me, they're not going to listen to you. Those are my lodge brothers. I work out with them. The only reason I didn't go to prison or that I was not arrested is because I was smart enough to be able to threaten them. I said, listen, I can't move my mouth right now. And you do what you want. My sister's a lawyer, my brother-in-law's a lawyer, and I will take your fucking badge. If you excuse me, that I broke the law. If you take me to jail, so you do whatever you need to do. But I had to defend myself that way. And then what they did was they questioned my minor children. I had a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, and they pulled my 5-year-old and 7-year-old and made them choose parents. So I'm saying that the police are horrible at domestic violence, and I don't care what they say about what's happening in those homes. They shouldn't necessarily be there, but we do need to protect women because Black women are more likely to die at the hands of domestic violence than any other women in America right now.
I think what Mike is talking about is in situations where police could de-escalate. That's one example. And we've seen that in terms of where they come into white communities.
Oh yeah, all the time. They're good at it.
Right, but they're good at it because they see their humanity. They see the ability to resolve this situation. I don't need y'all. Can y'all just resolve this? We'll deal with it another day. When they come in our communities, that's not the first thing. How has it happened? It has happened. I could tell you a few stories where certain situations I should have got arrested or got a ticket. They didn't feel like doing it that day. But that's not the norm in our communities, and also around when we say defund the police, it triggers. We're not going to have no police. That's not what defund the police means. And that's, again, another part of the narrative.
Crafting the message.
Yeah, the message. And also, too, it's the money thing, too. There's so many like folks who say they're for this side, then they be double dipping, talking for the other side. I mean, we got so.
Well, no, and I agree with all of that. Listen, I'm for defund the police conceptually, right? We need fewer police. What I'm saying is that there are situations like domestic violence that I think we need a more thoughtful way of looking at it, to listen to survivors and to look at some of the interventions and talk to people who specialize in that, because a lot of times those situations can be mischaracterized. We have a situation, I'm not trying to take us too far afield, but where rape kits were not processed in Detroit because Black women were not seen as being victims. Black teenage girls not seen as being victims. So they just didn't process the rape kits for years. And we had to raise private foundation and donated dollars to process. And how many rapists were caught? Hundreds of rapists. Because again, I'm going to take you back to Dr. Joy Degree, when she said Black women were not seen as rapeable. Right. We are not seen as vulnerable. We are not seen as needing protection. Malcolm X said we are the least protected people in America, and we still are. And so I get very conscious of the need to make sure that as we talk about violence, as we talk about de-escalation, I'm not saying throw away the key, but I am saying we need to protect women, and we need to make sure that we understand that police are hostile to women's vulnerability and women's needs in our society. and one of the reasons why policing alone is not enough.
So agreed 100%. And I think I think you literally have underscored why we need to take that money away from them
Yes.
to the right people to show up. Because my point is not around blame and culpability. It's around the fact that there are moments where if somebody says X and Y, the police are like, well, no, not gonna do, and they literally will leave. They will just literally leave, right? And so it's like, it's like, okay, if this has happened 5 and 6 times, is this money being spent to solve this issue in a way that, to your point, protects Black women? No. That protects children? No. But if this is the only thing that we have that we can do, it's like the problem is we suffer from a lack of, I mean, it sounds overly simple. It's like a lack of imagination to an extent, but it's
it was what I was saying to Donna in the beginning, when Donna and I sort of had a little tip about the language around defund the police. And I knew from the beginning that language would not be effective. And it's not that I didn't believe in budget reallocation, but I knew that the language in the intended audience, it would not land with the intended audience. And so I kept saying, can we say something like reimagining the police? Because this is something especially when we look at the origination of police in America. Like, we don't need to just defund it. We need to completely take it up and reimagine what it is.
Reimagine public
in our
safety.
Society. Yeah.
Not even policing, public safety.
Public safety, period. Yeah.
That public safety is bigger than that. It should all be prevention. As much as possible, do prevention. And when needed, have some type of intervention. But we want to prevent as much as possible. And we don't have a prevention oriented society. And so I think that all of what you're saying about understanding the meaning of trauma, all that Yusef is saying about modeling different ways of being and rethinking and redefining and not allowing ourselves to be caught up and swept up in what so-called popular culture says we are as a people is important, and I think that being willing to have courageous conversations about that is important, because sometimes you get seen as not really understanding or not being, whatever it is. If you don't like BMF, what's wrong with you? It's our people, it's our culture. And then we bring this in as culture. And I just wanted to just raise one other thing, because I want to see if I'm hearing this from you, Yusef. Culture is something that should be preserved. But dysfunction is not something that should be preserved.
Correct. So give example to your point, right, around the BMF series, right? And it's like many of us on this platform, you guys are educated or affluent, blah, blah, blah. But we associate culture and being Black with partying. Like, you can be culture without partying. Like, I have to turn up to prove myself. And this is because Black is not defined. It's not associated with a culture, and it's continuing to be remade and reimagined through a BMF. Because also, again, I mean, like, we talk about the East Side. I remember when the Chamber brothers got arrested, and they found a videotape of them passing out they had a trash bag full of dollar bills, passing it out. And then when they showed that on the news, that's when the die get rich mentality was born in the neighborhood. Like, oh, that's how we can make money. Everybody and their mom was trying to sell dope, right? But what was the end result? Self-destruction of our communities.
Absolutely.
Listen, I purposely, I'm normally a stickler for time, but I purposely let this go over because the conversation is so rich. And I have to say on the record that we definitely need a part 2 with the future Dr. Yusef and Mike O'Brien. I want to also go on record in thanking the both of you for your generosity in this conversation. The sharing of your experiences, the sharing of your knowledge has been invaluable. Like, my heart is feeling something that I can't name right now. I almost want to cry. An amazing, raw, authentic conversation. Yes, we're gonna have to put the parental advisory on this one, but I expected that one because we got Yusef on here.
No, it was me.
No, but Yusef already had dropped a few bombs, and then Donna went for the gusto. She was like, "I'm gonna one up you, Yusef." But I think Mike was like, "I'm coming in I'm coming in soft because
I
Mama like to
apologize
listen.
to your mother, Mike. I try not to make this. I want her to understand this is not my normal speech. Sometimes I get emotional. I
It's all
apologize, Mom.
But if you have topics that you want discussed on Authentically Detroit, you can hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Authentically Detroit, or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. It's our favorite part of the show. It's time for shout outs. Donna, you got any shout outs?
No. Oh, yes, I have shout outs, but I don't know who to. I'm so tired. I want to shout out Dr. Otuahene for her clinic on housing that's taking place at Chicago Kent Law School. I was the speaker yesterday, and it was one of those things that was really stressful, trying to prepare and trying to live up to her exceptional scholarship and sound good, you know, with all of her law students. But she's an amazing woman, and she has really helped transform the way we look at property taxes and ownership in the city of Detroit. So shout out to her and all of her work.
Yeah. Yusef, Mike, shout outs.
I'll give a shout out to any and everybody, man, that's pursuing their PhD. Stick with it.
We praying for you, brother.
Black people. I love Black people. Shout out y'all for having this conversation, you know, and yeah, agreed. Shout out to Black women and Black children because we don't protect them. So I think that is real. And I'm disgusted that you had to raise private money to process rape kits. Like, that's wild.
490 challenge. It was an amazing situation. And my friend Kim Trent, let me shout out Kim Trent for her work in championing that. And, you know, you had women standing up acknowledging that they were survivors of rape. And it's not easy for women to do that, but Kim Trent took the lead.
All right. Shout out to you, Kim Trent. We love you here. You got to come back. You got to come on pretty soon. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. And as always, we want you to catch the wave.